Hello and welcome back. Today we are continuing our tutorial series. Last episode we talked about how to expand with low infamy in a general sense, and today we will talk about specifically where you want to be expanding. We will talk about expanding through Conquest, expanding through Vassalization, expanding through customs unions, protectorates, also colonizing, and finally where we can expand while keeping infamy low. As a general heuristic for all of this, we will be wanting to keep our infamy under 25 because having it under 25 allows you to form customs unions much easier, get protectorates much easier, and this is an essential part of expansion before you get, big enough where you can just start vassalizing everyone. So as a general rule, the way infamy works is taking places that have higher population accrues more infamy, and taking places that are from recognized countries takes more infamy. So in general, we will be wanting to go for low population places and places with, more resources in terms of when we are doing Conquest. When we are forming customs union, in general, we want to go for really high population places because with the customs union, we can siphon off those pops. So this is kind of a general kind of heuristic. We will be going for high resource places. Specifically, we're going to be talking a lot about gold and oil because these are kind of the really, really big ones, but coal is also important. And finally, there are some regional considerations. So for example, everyone and their mother has an interest in Arabia, so expanding in Arabia early on is kind of difficult, but if we take a look at some place like Persia, still a lot of interest, but Anatolia, not so much. So this kind of also plays a factor into considering where we are going to expand, and why don't we start it off with talking about where we should colonize. So in general, I think there are two regions that are really good to colonize for regional considerations and also resource considerations. And that is the La Plata region down here. Specifically, this province here will generate gold in Araucana. So this is nice. Mapuche has some nice farming areas. If we take a look and you do not have access to, let's say, sugar and dyes, you can get a little bit right here from the sugar and dyes, not too much, but this also gives you just access to some farming. Often you want to develop your farming in overseas territories because it contributes less clout to the landowners. So this is a nice place. Also, if you take a look at the strategic region, La Plata is a nice place to expand because if you zoom in, pretty much for the most part, the US will get rid of this interest and it'll just be the UK with the native interest with the Falkland Islands. And so what this means is you can kind of expand in La Plata without anyone sticking their finger in your pie. And once you have a presence in La Plata, it becomes easier to get customs unions with Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, New Granada, and snake your way up South America. This is generally a good expansion plan and why La Plata is a good place to colonize early. A second place that's really good to colonize early is Hokkaido. Having a native interest in Japan is nice because one of the best low infamy wars is against Japan. And also, gold will come here, and this place has a ton of resources. It has every type of resource. Oil doesn't appear there, that's fine, but also gold will appear here. You can also colonize Sakhalin if no one else gets to it, which will prevent anyone else from having a native interest in the strategic region, which means you can often declare stuff in there without being penalized. Now, as far as colonization goes, there's a few other places you could colonize. A big part of colonization is this malaria modifier, which makes it so you colonize slower. So the other places that don't have malaria are, we have down here in the southwestern portion of Australia, we have Nugar, which will also generate some gold. So this is a decent place to colonize, and it'll also give you a native interest in Australia, which will allow you to trade with them, which can be generally a good thing. North and South Island will also generate gold, so this is a good place to colonize, and they are also do not have any malaria. As far as malaria places go, or places that start to have malaria, there's two places in the Congo you can colonize that only have regular malaria instead of severe malaria. One of the better ones that I don't utilize often enough in my game is colonizing Kenya, because Kenya gives you access into the Congo, and it is notably malaria free. It gives access on this side, and you can snake your way in, get a lot of these territories which are just regular malaria, and then just kind of stop because you only want to get just the regular malaria modifier, so you can kind of get this large big chunk around here. And then Also, one little part of Fang, or South Cameroon, also has regular malaria, so this is good to colonize. The reason why, in general, this more northern portion of the Congo, this is really good to colonize, is because you get a ton of rubber here, and there's also a lot of, not oil, but coal, and other resources like iron, and so generally this is a pretty good spot to get colonies. Also, if you can cut off the entire coast, this is a pretty big deal, and there's 3 points of ingress as far as the coast goes that the AI normally uses, and that's here, here, and here. You can also go in through Zulu and Portugal, but this is just kind of another thing. And then let's see, finally, if you get cut off here from the Congo, you can still snake your way in by conquering Galeti, Borana, and Kaffa and still get into this area, but generally speaking, this is not the most efficient sort of way of going about things, but it is an option. Okay, these are kind of the best places to colonize. Colonizing in here, not that great, so you can do it. You can also colonize all these little islands. They don't have any malaria, but they're kind of annoying to manage. You have to build ports on every single one. It's okay, it's not bad, but this is, I would prioritize, you know, going La Plata and Hokkaido before you have the anti-malaria tech being quinine. And then once you have quinine, trying to get a hold of Kenya to cut anyone off there, and also this area are probably going to be the best ones. Caleb's is also a nice area to expand if you specifically need dyes, and Papua for the same reason, but you need the anti-malaria tech. No one colonizes Papua and Caleb's very early, so you can hold off. Okay, as far as Conquest goes, there's going to be, we're talking about Conquest now, there's going to be kind of a few heuristics. We want to go and conquer places that are single state or not even a full state, have really low population, are unrecognized. These three as a general heuristic, and again, being sensitive to the fact that we want particular resources, gold and oil being the two most important discoverables, but also you can conquer for coal, but generally speaking, you can import and export coal more comfortably than you can, you know, the oil. So let's get into it. East Borneo in general is going to be really good as a place to conquest because these places do not even have a full state. They have relatively low population and a lot of oil appears here. The really low population will mean it's just tiny infamy. So a lot of times you want to find a war that's just a little bit of infamy so you can overall decay throughout the war. Every single one of these little miners here in East Borneo is great. Also, West Borneo has gold, so West Borneo is also a great place to conquest, and they all have this modifier that's particularly good, or almost, I think the entire island has this modifier for the plus 25% hardwood output, which is also pretty good. So, altogether, all of Borneo is a relatively good place to conquest because of this. Now, Bahrain is also a great place to conquest because they will have a lot of oil. They are part of the Trucal states in terms of the single state, but the Trucal states not a good place to conquest because they start out as a subject of Great Britain. However, one of the downsides of expanding in the Arabian Peninsula in general is a lot of people have interests here. They might stick their finger in your pie if you try and do a conquest here. It's a little bit harder to get a war off there than it is here in Indonesia, but Bahrain has a lot of oil. South Africa is an excellent place to expand. You might want to use puppeting into, generally speaking, you might want to do puppeting into annexing because these places tend to have a little bit higher population. We have like 600k, 500k, 380k, but Zulu, not particularly good. They do have some resources. If I recall correctly, I think they have coal. Yeah, they have a decent amount of coal, so this is not nothing. But the really good states are Transvaal and Oranhe. They both have a ton of coal, a ton of iron, and they both can discover gold. And they give you access to, I believe, a malaria-only little chunk of the Congo. And this one doesn't even have any malaria. And so a little chunk of the Congo that you can colonize, you know, down here without any sorts of penalties. So, excellent place to expand. You can do it through Conquest or puppeting. It's kind of on the fence between the two. Let's see. Nejd also has a ton of oil that appears. And it's also going to be really low population, so it's only going to accrue a little infamy. Excellent state to just conquer. You don't have to worry about puppeting them first because the infamy is so low. You know, if we just go in here and we just go conquer state, as the UK, it's only 4 infamy. We could puppet them and then conquer them, but we're only saving about 1 infamy. This is not a big deal, so a good state to conquer. Now, Congo is occasionally a state you will also want to conquer just because they give you access into the Congo. If you get cut off and you still want to get into the Congo race, into some of the deeper and richer and better places into the Congo, then conquering Congo makes sense. Congo with a K, so you can colonize Congo with a C. Also, in a general sense, you want to have as many fronts as you can for colonization, so this can make colonization a little bit faster if you just conquer the Congo, because you'll be able to colonize in here while you're colonizing out here. Just a thought. You could also puppet them. They are not like a they still have 500,000 population, so it will be a little bit of infamy, depending on whether you're a great power, recognize this type of stuff. It'll be around 8 to 10, something like this, but it's a decent amount of infamy. And then finally, as far as good resources go, you can conquer Aish, however it's pronounced, and Sayak. These are decent ones. Sayak notably is 2 provinces, so you might want to puppet instead of conquer. But you can go after this little block here, which will have quite a bit of oil as well. Now, these are all the places you want to conquer because they have a lot of resources, and they also have really relatively low population relative to those resources, particularly going after the gold. However, there is a cap on how much infamy you can generate from a single war or a single province take. If you notice here, I think we have an interest here in Great Qing. If we go to declare a war on them, you'll notice just about all of them will cost 22.5 because they're all at cap. I think the cap is around 5 million, so declaring a war for a really high province state is also a good idea. The highest province state you can declare at the start of the game, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is Fujian, which has a population of 16 million, and then Jiangxi, which has an even bigger population of 24 million, which you can snake your way into after getting Fujian. So if you want to get just as many pops into your market as possible, siphon off from here because they will migrate to your country as long as you're not discriminating against them. They will just migrate away once you take the praise. Another really good place to conquer, because they have an enormous population and because of a unique building, is Beijing. I go after it quite often in my games. It gives plus 50 authority, plus also plus 20 legitimacy from including the head of state of government. If your government is either a monarchy where you're keeping the head of state in, or if you decide to do a parliamentary republic, this will be really, really nice for keeping your legitimacy high, which helps you generate loyalists, which helps you get bonuses, and also pass laws and all these sorts of things. And so Beijing is a really nice state to conquer. Notably, you can't really get these provinces very easily through vassalization, because vassalizing Great Qing is almost as impossible, because demoting them from being a regional major power takes a whole lot of breaking them up. So this in general has been, kind of where you want to go. So as far as vassalization goes, we're going to talk about vassalization now. The general heuristic is kind of going to be the same for vassalization. You want to stick places that are relatively low population, are resource rich, and this is kind of going to be a thing. For vassalization, you want to go after places that have more than 1 or 2 provinces. So any place that has 3 provinces but still fits the bill for the types of places you would want to annex or just conquer straight up is going to be another one for vassalization. So for example, vassalizing Siak is okay because they have 2 provinces. You would want to vassalize Sulu. I believe Sulu has 3 provinces, so if they back down, it would take 3 wars to conquer all of them, whereas it only takes 2 to vassalize and then annex. So Sulu is an example of a country you would want to vassalize. Same with Tidor, which has decent resources, but Tidor is not super high priority, although they have really low population. So again, you're getting a lot of resources to population ratio. The ones that particularly come to mind are Tripoli, which will have a lot of oil. They have a low population overall, like very low. So they are going to be a really good, let's click on the nation. They only have a population of about 1 million. They're going to be a really nice vassalization. You get oil here. Having an interest in North Africa can kind of be useful to some extent. Another one I really like to go after is Venezuela. They are 3 provinces, and they will also get both gold and oil. So it's a really nice one to vassalize and then annex kind of early instead of just sitting on the vassalization. It will cost a little bit more infamy than average, but again, they have a population of under 1 million, so it's not too much. Also, regarding, going down here early on and colonizing here in La Plata and then this being generally a soft area to expand in. Almost every single game, I vassalize Argentina and Chile. They are soft targets. You know, you can incorporate them later. You get some resources down here as well. You know, you will have the oil, you will have the lead, a little bit of lead, some iron. You will have quite a lot of sulfur, and a lot of places start without any sulfur, and so you can get that all down here through vassalizing. And finally, we have these 3 South African states. Again, you can straight up conquer these, but vassalizing these and playing it a little bit slower is also okay. I often conquer Zulu and then vassalize Transvaal. You could just vassalize and then conquest, and you do this if you want to be a little bit slower. If you have a lot of useful wars you can declare, generally vassalizing is a little bit of a slower thing. The reason to vassalize over just straight up conquering is it generates about 70% of the amount of infamy total to vassalize and then conquer, as opposed to just straight up conquer. But these are also just one province things, so you can just go after them pretty comfortably. Now, in general, vassalizing will accrue kind of a large amount of infamy. The reason we don't like vassalize, you know, like a country like Brazil is because they have a huge population. It's going to take a lot of infamy to vassalize them. Or a country like Persia, huge population. It's going to take a ton of infamy to vassalize them. That will take us over 25 infamy, which makes it hard to pull people into our customs union. We want to pull people into our customs union so we can siphon off pops from them and get cheaper labor, make sure all of our places are fully employed, this sort of thing. And so, let's talk about the best places to try and get customs unions. I think probably one of my personal favorites, okay, also as a little bit of an adjustment here, we are talking about places we want to develop customs unions without really having the intention of protectorating them. These are what we're going to talk about first. A lot of times you will turn customs union into a protectorate. We'll talk about that after. So first up, we have Persia, the entire Persian bloc, you know, Persia and Central Asia. Let's see if we can get the regions. Yeah, Persia, Central Asia, and North India. All the little countries in this area are really, really nice for pulling into your customs union for a few reasons. First of all, they have opium. A lot of times you won't have access to opium as a bunch of different nations, which breaks your ability to use certain PMs, the military PMs for the hospitals and stuff like this. And so pulling them into your market gives you some access to opium. Also, Persia in the southern portion, so the reason why Persia is kind of in this list of customs union only countries is because often they will be defending the borders and they will have a very illiberal government, so getting them into protectorate status is a bit more difficult because you have to bankroll, invite to customs union, and then protectorate, and they're going to have a bunch of negative modifiers from ideological differences. However, if you can get them, they do have a bunch of oil down here. But getting all these guys into your market is great. If you can eventually get a land border with Great Qing, or sorry, not a land border. If your market stretches all the way to Great Qing, this is really good. So what I mean by if it stretches, let's say our market capital is here in Cairo. If we have a customs union with the Ottomans, and then with Persia, and then with Afghanistan, and then with Kokand, we will have a contiguous land route from our market capital all the way to China. When you have a contiguous land route between your market capital and another country, you get to trade with them using 0 convoys. Having a 0 convoy trade route with Great Qing is really good because you get to export a ton of finished goods to them and import a ton of stuff like fabric and silk, and this will help your economy a ton. Part of getting through that is going to be getting these guys into your market, and also all of these guys, except for Persia, are really cheap to bankroll, and they also have decent populations, which kind of makes them not as good to annex. An exception to this is you could go for annexing Makran and then Kalat. They don't have super high populations, or annexing and then vassalizing, something like this. But for the most part, they will start to jump up in population. They are good to have in your market so you can siphon off pops from them. They will also have opium. This is another reason, and this sort of stuff. And also their GDP is really low, so it is very cheap for you to bankroll them early. This is a place I really like to go early on with trying to, you know, pull into my customs union. Okay, Southeast Asia, kind of going to be similar reasoning. They have high population, they have decent resources, you will get stuff like dyes from them. You get some opium from them as well, especially Burma, I think, has the most opium, and this sort of stuff, so getting these guys into your customs union is also nice. But Siam starts out with a closed market. They start out as isolationists, so you can't pull them in immediately. Japan is really good to pull into your market because they have a population of 31 million. And so this means long term, if you can get them into your market, you can siphon off an enormous amount of pops. Again, this is a big part of why colonizing Hokkaido is good, because later on you can declare a war to open their market and then work to slowly pull them into your market. They will almost always be defending the borders, so they are very, very difficult to protectorate. I think they are hard-coded to be defending the borders more often, and so they will be difficult to protectorate, but you can keep them as a customs union. These are kind of the big ones, I think, these three. For people you want to pull into your customs union and then maybe just leave them there and not try and protectorate them. A couple other mentionables are Egypt is pretty good to get in your customs union. They do have a higher GDP, so it will be expensive to pull them in, but they have a population of 9 million. They do produce opium. They tend to produce a lot of cotton and this sort of stuff, so this is going to be good. They will consume a lot of goods, and so you will be able to siphon off the pops. Also, if you... Ottomans are particularly good if you can get them in the customs union. They're really, really good if you can get the Ottoman, Persian, Afghanistan, Khakan train into Great Qing for reasons mentioned earlier. But again, they will often be defending the borders or be fairly conservative, have a high difference in terms of the government, and so they will not want to, join in. We actually have pretty high similarities in the government, actually, here with Great Britain. But Ottomans is another one that you can try and pull in. It is easier, I believe, for recognized countries to pull other recognized countries into protectorates and unrecognized to pull unrecognized as being protectorates. I think that plays into the ideological differences. But also Central America will be nice to pull in just to your customs union and just leave them there. You can also just straight up annex them, but if you pull them into the customs union, Central America often breaks up into littler countries. It will help because invite to customs union if you don't have a adjacent border. We do have an adjacent border with them, though. If you don't have an adjacent border, we have an adjacent border. With the UK, we have an adjacent border with everyone, but you get this -20 market that is not adjacent to ours penalty, and so one reason to go after Central America specifically, or, the block of Central American countries, is to get an adjacency to New Granada or to get an adjacency to Mexico, so that it's easier to pull these two countries into your market and focus on protectorating them. Anytime you protectorate a nation, it costs 6 infamy, so it doesn't make sense to protectorate little nations at all. Okay, and then another reason to pull customs union is getting adjacent to Prussia. If you are, let's say, playing France, or France already starts adjacent, but Spain, or just trying to get adjacent, this actually doesn't quite work. Never mind, forget that one. I was thinking same way you try and snake to Great Qing, you could also try and snake to Prussia, but I forgot when I put the note down here that you have to have a market capital, a land route from your market capital all the way to the nation, and this is what allows you to get the free convoyless trade. And then that is kind of the main groups of guys you want to do a customs union but not protectorate. Let's talk about protectorates now. So some of the biggest ones to protectorate are Mexico. Now, Mexico is really good to protectorate and then annex. There's a ton of gold in all of Mexico. There's gold down here. There's a really big ton of gold in, California. There's gold in Nevada. There's gold in Arizona. Or is there gold in Arizona? I can't remember. I think there is. I'm not 100% sure. I think there might be gold in Colorado. Tons of gold. Tons of gold. Also, small economy, so they're relatively easy to, pull in. They also have a decent population that you can siphon off. Mexico is really, really good to get as a protectorate. They're also generally more willing to go protectorate. They don't defend the borders too much, so getting them in as a protector is really great. You annex them. The United States beats them up. If you can defend them and then protectorate them, this is generally a pretty good play. And with the intention of annexing them for all the gold. Brazil is another really good one to protectorate. They have a ton of resources here in Brazil and a ton of potentials. You can get a ton of logging if you protectorate them. Remember, protectorate will cost you 6 infamy, and then once they are a subject and they are a protectorate, you switch to vassalizing them later, and vassalizing them will only cost 10% of the infamy it otherwise would. So protectorating really big nations is the idea. Generally, you want to go for big countries where paying 6 infamy to protectorate them is a drop in the bucket relative to how much you will spend to vassalize them later. And so this will allow you to generate a lot less infamy. Brazil's really good. A lot of choppy. There's a little bit of gold in Brazil, but not like a ton. Spain is also a decent one to protectorate, especially if they still have, you know, the Philippines and Cuba and these sorts of things in tow. They will have a decent amount of resources. They have decent population. The big one to protectorate them is for the population. You could also just customs union keep them in for the population. They are generally easier to protectorate, though, because of less ideological differences. Portugal, basically for the same reasons as Spain, except incorporating Portugal is quite nice because it gives you all this surface area in the Congo, which allows you to colonize more, and it also gives you this little province here, Macau, which has actually a decent amount of arable land potentials, and also gives you, you know, some strategic, both a strategic interest in this region, which is nice, but also it makes it easier to go into Great Qing in some situations, so this is also kind of nice. After this, Netherlands, they have a decent population, but if you protectorate / puppet / customs union them, you also pull in the huge population of the Dutch East Indies, which is quite nice. You get to siphon off these populations. You know, you can protectorate and then annex them, and then annex these boyos a little bit later if you'd like. This is decent. Sweden is another one that's okay. They don't have a huge population, so maybe you just customs union them, but they do have a ton of resources in Sweden, both wood and iron. You know, they have bonuses on most of their territories for wood and iron, I think. So this is going to be like pretty big as far as resources go. They have a comparative advantage. And so getting them into the market is decent, and then, you know, eventually annexing them is also pretty solid. You could just puppet them straight up, but it will be a lot of infamy, you know, to just puppet them. You know, 33, you want to stay under 25. This is not quite the play. If you first protectorate them, and then it will cost only, you know, 3.8 infamy in order to puppet them once you've protected them, so it only costs a total of like 9 infamy, but pretty good target for the resources, and the fact that often people don't have too much of like interest in the region up here, so it's kind of like a safe / slow. Another good one is New Granada to puppet, or to protectorate with the intention of puppeting. The big reason is the Panama Canal. This prevents you from having to pay extra for the Panama Canal or having to declare an extra war just to take like a little chunk of Panama. Instead, you just go after all of New Granada. This is something I do almost every single game. I think that this strategy is relatively strong. There's also a decent amount of like logging and other resources here, you know, and potentials. That's pretty good. And they also don't have the biggest pop, but it is a big enough pop where, you know, just straight up vassalizing them is less appealing, although it is low enough that it is like something that's on the table. It's 1.6 million, so to puppet them, it would cost 21 infamy. Much rather protectorate them and then puppet them for 2 infamy for a total of 8 infamy, but you could just puppet them just right off the bat. This is not a terrible idea. Venezuela, you'll notice, is a little bit less infamy, and so this is kind of the heuristic. You know, if the country is, you know, 12 or so infamy, I think puppeting them is okay. If they start getting, you know, 18 plus, I think protectorating into puppeting is a little bit better. But that is New Granada. Occasionally, you can puppet the United States, or you can protectorate the United States. It really depends on how things shake out. The United States is highly volatile. Sometimes you get weird, like, chop-ups of the United States. But protectorating, puppeting, and then annexing the United States is really nice. They do have this up here in New York Harbor, the Niagara Falls, which gives increased electricity output, so this is quite nice. They have a bunch of really, really, really strong provinces. You know, they have all these, like, extra coal building throughput with like 100 coal, so you're just gonna have a 60% throughput bonus. Or where's Virginia? West Virginia? Yeah, so when you have level 60 coals, you're gonna be getting the 50% throughput bonus, you know, from building tall, plus an additional 10% on the top for this. It's like 60% throughput bonus. Huge. And so, you know, if you can puppet United States, is a really great one to do, but you have to do it through protectorating, because if we can't even start play against the United States, but it's like 200 infamy or something. So if you protectorate them first and then go to puppet them, it's only like 20 infamy, something like this. You know, any country that is big, but is not, let's see, if you just sort by population, any country that is big but is not a great power and is not a regional major power is a decent country to puppet or Protectorate if you can. A lot of times countries like Japanese Shogunate will not be puppetable because they will be defending the borders and they just like never go for it. But you know, Ottomans would be good. Sikhs would be decent, although getting them, they will often be defending the borders as well. Spain, good. You know, Dutch East Indies, a lot of these we've already covered. But let's continue on. And finally, as we mentioned a little bit when we were talking about Persia in general, puppeting Persia is good just because annexing Persia is good more than anything. You know, they do not have the biggest population, so the amount you save on it is, well, actually it's quite a big amount. So it's 46 infamy. So if we puppet or if we protectorate them before we puppet them, keeping in mind we have to customs union, then protectorate, then puppet, and then annex. Instead to puppet them, it's going to be, what is this? 46 infamy, it'll be like 10 infamy total instead of 46 infamy. It's a really, really big difference. But the main reason to annex them is to get access to all of the oil that will appear down here, which is a solid amount, as well as provinces that can make, if I'm not mistaken, we have to zoom in a little when we pick, provinces that can make opium. And also, I was not aware, but they do have a bonus on the dyes. Dye plantation throughput, so that is a pretty good province. I think more of these can produce opium as well, so you would probably want to specialize opium. Yeah, so specialize like opium here and specialize dyes over here is a perfectly fine place to go. They will be defending the borders a lot, so they will be kind of hard to protectorate most of the time, but if you can pull it off, it's pretty good. Okay. So we've talked about Conquest, we've been talking about Vassalization, Customs Union, Protectorating, Colonization. Now there's the last thing. If you start to have a ton of infamy, you want to find wars that are going to be useful for you that accrue no infamy. One thing you can do is you could open people's market and release, if you are trying to cut anyone down to size like a great power, we could, for example, go for a war against France to open their market, and this will accrue no infamy, and then force them to release Occitania down here in Brittany. This is an example. You can do this with almost any great power you want to cut down to size. You know, Russia, you can have them release Ukraine. Austria, you can have them release Hungary. Prussia, I'm not sure which the biggest country you can release from them is, but you can. Spain, you can have them release Andalusia. All of this sort of stuff in order to take countries down to size. So this is kind of what we want to do when we want to do low infamy war. This is one thing, but there's a few specific wars that I find myself declaring a lot, and let's go into them. First is opening Japan's market. In order to pull them into the customs union, they have to not be isolationist. And so there's 3 countries that are rather large that are isolationist at the start of the war, at the start of the game, that are good to open up their market, so you can try and pull them into your customs union at a later date. Generally, this is a fairly slow process. It takes like 40 years, but if you're sitting at 25 infamy and you want to decay and you want to use your army, doing this is fairly good look. Siam also starts out with isolationism. The last one is Sokoto, also starts out with isolationism. All of these countries have decent populations and good amounts of resources. Japan being the best, because they have 30 million population, right? All of these will be decent to open up and then later try and pull them into your customs union. They'll generally be kind of hard to, fully protectorate. You could do a war to regime change them. If you really, really want to protectorate Japan, for example, you could regime change in Japan as well. You could do it in the same war, I believe, but they are very, very likely to back down when you declare a play to open their market. And so you would want the regime change to be the primary war goal, the open market to be the secondary war goal. Okay. I'm not 100% sure, but regime change might also just open their market. I'm not 100% sure how the regime change mechanic works. It doesn't seem to make them the exact same laws as you, but it pulls them in that direction. It might just do power structure. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Okay, another good war that is going to be fairly common is releasing Iraq from the Ottoman Empire. Iraq will have Basra, Baghdad, Mosul, and yeah, I think it's just these 3, but all 3 of these produce a ton of oil, so releasing Iraq from the Ottoman Empire and then vassalizing Iraq or protectorating Iraq is a fairly strong play in a general sense. And finally, releasing Canada, all of Canada, or parts of Canada from the UK is also really strong because Canada will generally have low populations and they will have a high amount of resources. They have a lot of natural resources just kind of flat to begin with, but a ton of oil appears there as well. And so releasing Canada or transferring Canada from Great Britain, transferring will of course accrue a decent amount of infamy, will do quite a bit to help you out, but just releasing them with the intention of conquering or vassalizing straight up. And in particular, Ontario is a very strong state because they do have Niagara Falls for the 20% building electricity throughput, which will help your electricity be really nice. If you can get this state or New York kind of early on in the game and just build like a level 1000 electrical place there at some point, it tends to be very, very strong. If you are really trying to mess up the UK in terms of who to release from them, the best one you can do is release the East India Company / British Raj and also Baroda. If you release these two, all of these interior countries will not have access to Great Britain's market. So this will basically completely brick all these countries as far as Great Britain is concerned in terms of how it's helping them out. So that is kind of those in my mind are the best low infamy wars. The general heuristic is you can either, if there's a power you want to make weaker, you can either open up their market and then, release a bunch of stuff. You need the open market for the initial CB because you cannot declare a release war as your initial CB. And then the other ones are, getting rid of isolationism on Japan, Siam, and Sokoto, and also releasing Iraq / releasing Canada. With the intention of going after these yourself. These ones are really good to go after, not just because you're trying to weaken Great Britain or Ottomans, but because they are just really good to go after. Okay, so this has kind of just been all of the specifics in regards to where the best places to expand are. Just a quick note or a reminder, it's good to be sensitive to, a little bit sensitive to strategic regions. It's not super, super important, but generally if there's a lot of great powers, or if the great powers don't like you, you kind of want to be a little bit more careful. This does make La Plata and South Africa kind of the two places that are best to expand early, because it's just Great Britain that will have an interest in them. Again, you're doing La Plata, both the colonizing and the vassalizing Argentina and Chile. And the South Africa, you're either conquering or vassalizing into here for the gold. And this is kind of, good places to expand that are easy, low infamy, this sort of thing, and how you should go about it. Again, just kind of run through the heuristics really quick on conquer through protectorate. The states you want to conquer are places that have a single state, really low population, really high resources, or extraordinarily high population. The places you want to vassalize are similar to the ones you want to conquer, but they might have 3 or more states, in which case, for example, Sulu has 3 really low population states. Same with Tidor, their overall population is extremely low, but they have more than 2 states, and they're very likely to back down, so getting all of them, you would want to puppet them first, and then annex them, as opposed to just taking one state. So you still want to go after mainly unrecognized countries with low populations and high resources. Venezuela, Tripoli, and Argentina / Chile are some of the bigger countries that I think you should want to maybe vassalize, as well as some of these, these ones down here. But generally, once something starts getting over 12 infamy, 18 infamy, 20 infamy, around this range, somewhere in there, I think it is better to try and protectorate countries and then vassalize them, as opposed to just vassalize them straight up. For countries you want in your customs union, it changes a little bit. Resources, you stop wanting really high dense resource countries, although resources aren't bad, but you start wanting really high population countries, like the Sikh Empire, for example, with the really high population that you can siphon off into your market. Also, this population will consume a lot of your consumer goods, and so this will help you, the increased consumption is really nice, and generally these countries will also be producing, if we look at the Sikh Empire and we look at the Sikh market, they will generally have high sell orders of a lot of inputs for you, and they'll have high buy orders of like outputs that you can give them, and so this will be great for you in terms of being really profitable inside of their thing. And then For the ones you just want to stay in your customs union, often it is going to be unrecognized countries that are difficult to incorporate because ideological differences between your government. You can, whenever you're looking at the Make Protectorate, you can see if the ideological differences just completely brick you. You, of course, will be getting an obligation in order to make this work, but this is kind of what you're looking for in terms of countries you want to just leave at a customs union if they are too hard to get in. Also, snaking a customs union is another thing to keep in mind. For example, if we're playing the Ottomans, customs union Persia, Afghanistan, and Caucand is extremely strong because then we get free, no convoy access to Great Qing's market, and so even the Caucand by themselves is not the most valuable, person to have in our customs union. Having zero convoy access to Great Qing is really important, so keeping in mind you can use customs union to snake through. You also, for example, if you already have New Granada in a customs union, getting Central America in a customs union just to get adjacency to Mexico is nice because you will not run the negative modifier of when you're trying to pull someone into a customs union for having the market not be adjacent to yours. So this is another reason to go after customs unions, just because it's expedient in that regard for getting the 20 bonus, which is one of the reasons why Central America is decent for a customs union, even though they're really low population. Well, so you would never protectorate Central American countries because it's cheaper just to annex them / vassalize them straight up. And then finally, there's a bunch of countries you would want to protectorate first and then annex. One we took a closer look at was Persia. The reason why is because Persia, making them a puppet, is 46 infamy. If you protectorate them, that'll be 6. And then annexing or puppeting them after you've protectorated them will be only 10% of the cost, so it'll be 4. And so it'll be about 10 infamy to puppet them if you protectorate them first. And then when you annex them, it's going to be, I think, around 6 infamy, something like this. So a total of 16 infamy to annex everything. And so this is kind of the way you want to go about it. Colonization. There are 2 colonization texts that relate to the malaria, quinine, and malaria prevention. Generally, you want to keep off of malaria until you keep quinine, because it makes it colonization really slow, and then severe malaria until you get malaria prevention. And you kind of want to, some soft spots are Kyoku, La Plata, and Hokkaido up here. These are kind of the best ones that come to mind. And then we have the low infamy wars, which we already reviewed. So just quick, complete rundown of all, the stuff and how to think about expanding. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you have a sort of, recommendation or requests as far as tutorials go, would be greatly appreciated. Feel free to put it in the comments. I'm curious, what people want help on or these sorts of things. And have a good day.